Okay, guys. Well, for all of you that may have been to one of my webinars before, met me, or been in one of the basic courses, hello again. And for the people that don't know me, my name's Simon, and I'm the training and technical manager for Ivory Egg, and we also do the basic course training. We've tried to put value back to the customer in the form of education. We believe that is a driver of our industry, and it basically progresses our industry along. And KNX is quite a delicate subject and it's quite in depth. It can be overawing when you're coming out of the course. So from the onset, I want you guys to understand this webinar is about going back to basics. It's a review of the basic course to help you guys that have come out and haven't done a project or haven't done from for a while, looking at the setting up the structure of ETS to present a really solid and a solid solution at the end and least amount of mistakes in the most efficient way. So we'll move right in. Today, we're going to be covering in the contents, we're going to be covering planning. It's essential, okay, and how we can plan an ETS. Processes, why we use them. What is the process? And then we'll have a little look at a live demonstration on ETS. Then we're going to look at building view and functions, deciding on group address structure, project checking, downloading, that'll cover the address and the application, and testing with diagnostics. We're going to have a little look at templating. So it's not all about basic course. It's a little bit of stuff that can advance you a bit further. And as a bonus, we're just going to look at how we use secure devices, how the new feature of downloading with serial numbers, and something that's got me really excited and it should be for you, and that is calibration mode, the new feature for ETS. So without further ado, I'll move on. Essential. Planning is essential. So automation basically is the simplification of modern living. And the payoff is you as the integrator need to take something complicated and make it simple. Okay. You need to plan. In no other system or no other, it doesn't matter what automation system you're doing, we always find the best plans work out the best. If you're haphazard and you're making it up on the run, it's going to run like that and you're always going to forget things. A good idea when you're starting your project is consult us. We know the products that work well. We know the price structures. We know the value adds. We know the things to look out for. Use us is what we do. Don't forget, ETS is a really good planning tool. I'm going to show you a little bit, but if you can load your project into ETS before you've even quoted it, you can get things like board width modules, how much space you need in a switchboard, things like calculation of consumption of your bus devices. And you can do so much out of ETS already. From ETS, you can create a report that will give you a list of materials and a bill of materials, basically, of what you need. And you can send that off to get quoted in that. Whatever you do, please don't be the guy that's on site doing the programming on the upturned shopping cart or the paint tin. Now, we're all guilty of it, and I'm not saying I'm perfect and I'll never do it again. But ultimately, the best way to do KNX programming is to do it in the office, do the bulk of your office, and then you only go to site to download and do adjustments. It's good to be comfy in the office. You're not distracted. It'll save you heaps of problems and times. You can have a look at things like using multiple screens, have the internet, so if you need to download something, or just the comfort of having a desk and a chair. Really important that we plan. So let's look at process. Process is so important in all aspects of our business. It's essential in all the things we do. If we have something complicated, then the best way to break up a complicated thing is to make a process for it. So why do we use a process? A process is the fastest point from A to B, or from to start something and to finish it. A big complicated job is only just a lot of little jobs broken down. Simplification, because if we need to simplify what we do. ETS has heaps of information, and if you are caught without a process, you could be staring blankly into the screens, like I'm sure many of you have, wondering what's my next step? Where do I go from here? How come? What do I need to do? The other thing process does, it mitigates mistakes. Okay. And we all know mistakes is time and time's money. Money is time. Also, we do this to improve ourselves for our reputation. If we have a good process, we can rinse and repeat that process and copy and paste and get better at it. And we can trim and refine that process over time. So it's really important, apart from many other things, that we use process in KNX, and especially when we're new. So what is the process? Well, we have to create a project, fill in all the details of the project and any details that you might need. Then we have to create a building. Building view is a really nice way to look at a complicated project with many devices. Instead of looking at it on topology, we can go to the actual room. It makes more sense for us to use building view. Once we've created the building, we need to add our devices. We need to add them from the catalog into the building. Once we've added our devices, we need to parameterize the devices. Once we parameterize the devices will give us the communication objects that we're going to need, taking in consideration the functions we've asked the device for. These will then lead us to creating group addresses. So a good way to create your group address is to think about the functions of your building. But not only that, if you want to break it down to a smaller job, you've already parameterized the device. It's only going to give you the objects that you need based upon the functions you've asked it to do through parameterizing. Linking. It's a really important one. Once we've done our group addresses, we need to link our communication objects to the relative group addresses, or many more. It's a good idea, and I'm going to show you through the next demonstration to do a project check. A project check is a quick assessment by ETS. It lets you know little warnings or errors to look out for. After we've done a successful project check, we need to download. There's two significant parts to the download. First is the address. Now, the address is only downloaded to a device once, usually in its life. We need to have a unique address for every device on the network. This way, we can talk to each device individually. Because as you remember from the course, all devices come out of the factory, or if we factory reset them, they come out at the default address as 15.15.255. Now, if we had a network full of devices we hadn't addressed previously, then our computers or our ETS would just be looking at a whole lot of devices that are at the same address. It's not helpful when we're trying to uniquely talk to each address to give it its application and download to it. Application. This doesn't consider the address, just considers the information that you're programming, you're pushing into the device. This, you can download application many times to many devices, and it updates basically what the application does, loading in, make sure that your ETS project reflects the project on the actual job. Testing with diagnostics. I can't give this enough credit. The biggest thing I advocate for everyone to do when you're testing, open up your diagnostic window. This can save you a lot of time. If you open up your diagnostic window, then you move through your way of testing. What can happen is you get to a part of the building where something doesn't work. Instead of having to go back and replay that again, you can walk back to your diagnostics, have a look at your telegrams, and establish what the last telegram was and what went wrong. Was it the input didn't send the group address that you were expecting, or the output didn't respond to it? So these are things that are little tips and tricks that the elite programmers use to mitigate any mistakes in time. And finally, document and support. Document, export, and document. I'm going to have a little look at a new feature with ETS that I'm excited for, and it's bringing it right up to speed. Documenting always saves it in a nice place. Reporting is always established for really good integrators delivering professional projects. You should give all the reports. It's not hard to do. It's an easy job, and it comes across a lot professional. Everything's documented. So what I'm going to move to now is just a live demonstration. And what I'm going to do is we're going to create a project. It's going to be a shortened project. It's not going to be the quick version. We're going to break it down step by step like we did in the basic course, but it's going to give you a review of what we do, and we're going to follow the process, okay? So I've got my new ETS. where do we start? Well, the first thing we do, we go back to our process and our tree of process, and we start by making a project. And the project can be a project. We choose what the building type it is. The backbone is always usually set as IP. Okay. It establishes our first line. And as you guys remember, always use 3-level group address structure. So we go ahead and create our project. Okay. If you ever want to get back to the details of the project, you can always stay in the project. And if you go up the top right-hand corner, this little mark up here, you can get up to the project details and fill more information out. So don't forget that's where it is. What's important here is everything you see on here is also exported in the documentation. Okay. And it can contain things like if you're using secure devices, the secure certificates and keys, attachments from any parts of the job, and project tracing, handy for those guys that have got multiple people working on the same project. You can actually go through, if you have a look at the history, and you can see who did what when they did it. So you can see here, I started a job, I had made it an office building and it created the first line. Okay, so we've created our project. Now the next part of it is create the building. We have to create a meaningful building. Now, what you'll find a lot of the time is the project or the building name will be the name of the project. It's not always the case. So what we need to do is rename the building HQ. And then we need to add parts to the building. To do this, we simply click on the building and we can right click and add parts. So we can add floors. Now, what ETS does, it only lets you add parts that make sense. So I can't add a building to a floor. I can't add a device to a floor, but I can add a room to the floor. And also to that, we can also add distribution boards. This way it breaks up the job conveniently. Oh, sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing. So we can add a distribution board, a cabinet. This way, when we've got a big building or a small building, we're not searching through topology to find exactly where the parts are and what one we're talking about, identifying things by addresses. It's more unique, more understandable way to understand where the things are. So to this, then we can add parts to the parts of the building. So we can add devices to parts of the building. So for an example, we'd start out by adding our distribution board gear. And if I right click on the distribution board and go add, it'll open up the catalog. And just like the course, we'll put in some dimmers. You can search by stuff depending on part numbers, on descriptions, or previously used. To add the device to the floor, you just drop and drag, or you can double click. If you double click, it'll add the amount of devices to the building part or the topology to that exact section of the part. Okay, once we've done that, then what we want to do is we want to add a next part. Maybe we'll use like the basic course. Okay, so we can add a next part. And to make it more like a real job, we're going to add 2 devices that we have in our training cases. This way it's very familiar to what you've done previously. So you can see those 2 devices belong in the distribution board. And now I'll add the Ion 104, sorry. Now, the trick is here, the 104 is actually secure device. It can be used in secure mode, okay? If it's to be used in secure mode, there's plenty of videos that go and show you how to use it in secure mode, so I'm not going to go into it. One thing I do know a lot of the time people do is when you put a device in its secure mode, it automatically asks you to put a password protection on the project, which makes sense because we're trying to protect a secure key or a device key, everything that's attributable to that device. We can also use it as non-secured device, and the way we do that is drag it into the room. And for you guys that don't read, like myself, if you read through this, it would say, if you don't want to use it as a secure device, don't put a password on it, just press cancel. It'll still add it into the project, but now it's added it in as an unsecured device, okay? And that can save a lot of hassle. And finally, we'll add the good old Gira switch to the room. Okay, so what we're actually doing here is the most important thing, and I always go on about in the courses, is you've got a lot of information. You've got a lot of things happening. You've got to think of a lot of things. Try and push all that aside. Just concentrate on what you're doing at the time. It makes things much easier. If you follow this process, you can have 95% of your project done without really thinking about it. And that just leaves the last little bit to have a think about this tricky stuff you've got to do. So now we've added all our devices. The next thing we need to do is parameterize. We need to make sure that each of these devices are set up in the way we want to use them, okay? So it's a quick little look over the parameters to check that this device is selected the way we want to do it, and we have selected the functions we're going to need. I can tell you for a fact the dimmer comes out of the box with everything we need. It's got switching, relative dimming, value dimming, dimming feedback for a switching on and off scenario, and a value feedback in percentage. If we move to the blind actuator, this takes some parameterization because of the way the devices are in this certain range from Theben, and I'm not going to go into it. We went through that in the course. So I can tell you this is an RMG 8T, and the ability of this relay is to turn it into a blind actuator if required. So I can tell you that channel 1 is going to be a blind actuator. And what you'll see down the side here, it changes what we've asked it to do. So now we've changed channel 1 from being a switching actuator to a blind relay. It's changed my side menus here. You'll also notice my objects have changed from being the templated objects, which are come out by default, to the blind objects. And you'll notice here channel 2 hasn't changed. It's still a normal switching or a relay object, and you get those objects. So again, this goes a long way to telling you, or let me explain, KNX or ETS only gives you the communication objects you need after you've told it what you require from it. So just having a look through these parameters, all the parameters are fine. The only thing you've got to adjust here really is your downtime, depending on how long it takes your blinds to get to the bottom and the top. So that's the whole complete downtime. And it's also always a little bit different for the way up thanks to gravity. So we've got pretty much everything we need from here. A little thing I like to do sometimes is filter my objects to make them more understandable. And if I filter them by name, then I get all the channel 1s together in an order. So you can see all the channel 1s together, but it's up to you. Some people like to leave the number order. And the reason why the number is a bit strange to order it here is because you'll see all channel 1 up to here. But remember, we took channel 5 out of play with the relay. So it's converted channel 5 objects to channel 1 additional objects here. Moving on to the switch. We have to tell the switch what it's actually the job it's going to do. Remembering we can have a 2-button switch, or if it's a 4-button switch, depending on what it is. So with a 1-button switch, the first channel I'm going to do, or the first button I'm going to do, it's going to be a dimming channel. And the second button I'm going to do is going to be for the blinds. So in the first button, then we have to decide what type of function it is. Is it a button function? So am I pushing a button and getting a value or not, or if I'm using it a dimming or blinds. This one I'm going to use as dimming. And with it, because it's a one channel, one button dimming button, the long and the short response of that one button, at the moment, by default, it comes out as brighter and changeover. So if I was to push on it long, I'd only get a brighter command coming out of it. If I was to take my finger off and push it again, it would still only send a brighter command. However, if I short push it, I get it on and I get it off and on and off. So I want to change that because it's a one button dimmer operation to be a one button operation. We won't worry about LEDs in this example. For second button, the configuration option we want here is to be a blind control. So then we have to have a look at the blind control, and it comes out automatically because there's no other buttons for it to go with. It comes out automatically as a one button operation. Okay, so if we have a look at our objects, now we've got the ability for all that button to switch a load, dim a load, and on the second button, send the blinds up or down and step or stop them when they're running. Moving on to the third Gira switch, we're going to choose this to be rocker 1 is going to be lights, and the rocker 2 is going to be blinds. For this demonstration, we're going to leave it as a rocker function, but we could break it up into 1 and 2 buttons, separate buttons for different functions. For the first rocker, we're going to make it a dimming functionality. So you'll see on the left pressing of the rocker, on a short push, it's going to go brighter. And on a long push, it's going to go brighter. On a short push, it's going to turn on. We might change that to be brighter and toggle or darker and off. We'll choose it to be darker and off. And then on the right side, we'll choose it to be brighter and on. So that changes the functionality of the switch. On rocker 2, we're going to use that as a blind. So we can use the Venetian blind function. And this is where we get the choice to say what rocker does what. So we might do it the other way around. Left rocker down, right rocker up. We can leave the operation concepts, they're not so important. So from that, if I look at my communication objects, now I've got the ability, if I put my functions in order of the name, the first rocker has a switching function when I short push on it, and when I long push on it, the dimming function. Gira's gone a step further here, and they've said, it's up to you what you think should be a long push and a short push. We won't determine that for you. So you can either use the long operation to drive the blinds, which is what we suggest, to use the up and down operation, and the short operation to step stop. But if you had a customer that wanted it the other way around, they wanted a short push to drive the blinds and a long push to stop, you just swap these two around. And the same can be said for the Ion 104. Just because that sends an up or down, we all know in the background it's sending a 0 or a 1. Same with this is sending a 0, 1. If the customer wanted a long operation or short operation, you know through reading the manual that in a long operation will send out this communication object and a short operation will send out this communication object. If I was to attach that to the up down of the blinds, then I would get the opposite. On a short push, it would drive the blinds up or down, and a long push, it would step or stop. Okay, moving right on. Now, what it's given us great indication, a great insight to what group addresses we're going to need from what we've told it we want to do. Okay, if you have a look through and you're always stuck for that, that's a good way. If not, I suggest you take your time, develop a project, and we're going to look at that in templating in a bit, and just reuse the group addresses. You don't have to recreate them every time. And if the ones that are even smart enough, you would attach the group addresses to the dimmer, and then you can copy and paste and recreate the group addresses. So if I was doing a project and I had 10 of these dimmers in here, all I would have to do is parameterize the dimmer, create the group addresses, attach it to all the group addresses, then I can copy that dimmer and paste it another 10 more times, creating new group addresses, and it'll be already attached to created the group addresses. Okay, so moving right on to create group addresses, let's open up another panel. And in this panel, we're going to create our group addresses. Now, with group addresses, we're going to look in in the next few slides, there's many different ways to do group addresses. And I wouldn't say there's a right or a wrong way. I would say that there's worse or better. And it all depends on the project you're doing. A lot of the time it's suggested that your projects are always very similar. And if that is the case, you should have a templated set of group addresses that you can take from another project. You can either copy or paste them. In ETS, you can open up multiple projects at the same time. So you can open up a whole old project, copy the group addresses from that project, paste them into your new project. Or in the bigger companies, you can actually export the group address files to a CSV, save those, and then always start your new project importing your group addresses from your Excel file. And this way, a lot of your work is done. So there's many ways we can work. For this project, though, we're going to create some group addresses, and those group addresses are going to be reflective of our functions. So remember, group addresses have a unique proposition. There's only so many main group addresses, there's only so many middle group addresses, and there's only so many group addresses. So your structure is quite important. It's not to say that you use it one way it'll work or not. It's more about your insight into the project and how quickly you can find a problem. I'm going to show you a way that works with most projects, but it's open to suggestion and change depending on what you're using it for. So the good way to do it is to use your group addresses as your areas. And for this project, we've got multiple floors. So we're going to use a group address, main group address per floor. So we're going to use ground floor and first floor. Okay, now the real crux of the group addresses and your use of those group addresses comes with the middle group addresses. Because we've got 32 main group addresses and we've only got 8 middle group addresses, which means if you'd started your areas if your main group, or you started your main group addresses as your functions and your middle group addresses as your areas, you could run out of room. And it's always good to be systemized and doing things in a process. So our middle group addresses, I generally promote using them as our functional areas. So for example, lighting, blinds, HVAC, metering. I mean, we could go on forever. AV, a central one that's going to create or contain all of our scenes and our global group addresses. Once we create those group addresses, we can easily copy and paste these into the second floors and the third floor. So if I was to copy these here and paste them here, sorry, then you can see them all created here as well. I mean, that would be a quick way. Obviously, it would be nice to build the group addresses out and then do that. And so they'd have all the group addresses, or even better, importing them in from a templated CSV file or something you've made up previously that suits your company structure. Okay. Now comes to the nitty gritty. What we need to do, we need to create a group address for every function of our project. Okay. So we're going to look on the next few slides a few important points about group addresses. For this part, we'll just go ahead and through and make them. So after this presentation is done, I'll give you some projects with some templated group addresses that you can use and manipulate for your own good. So the first one we're going to do is living room. Now, I like to abbreviate these, but I still need to know what this meaning is. One thing I see a lot of the times is people not putting any description on the group address. This makes it really hard because once you import the ETS file into another software for visualization and stuff, and you're trying to link group addresses, you haven't got any description on them. You might just see them as switch, dim, value, but the value of what, the dimming of what. Not only that, when you're looking at your group addresses inside your project, they can get all messy. You start to rely on the number, and if you're anything like me, the numbers start to mean nothing. So it's always good to have a good description of your group address. I've got a switching group address, that's for my on and off. I've got a status group address for my feedback. And the other thing I'll go a point to say further is it's much easier to have a process and to put the groups in a group address, even if you don't know if you're going to use them. In other words, you sitting there wondering if you're going to need a group address or not, it's much easier just to have the group address and be done with it and know that you've got it there. So for an example on this project, we're going to need relative dimming because we're using a switch. But if we're not using visualization, there's no need we're going to need for a value group address, which is our send out lights to a percentage in brightness in percentage. I like to put little things to let me know what exactly this group address is doing. And value brightness feedback. Okay. If you're starting out, it's always nice to have a little space here in case you forget something later. Mind you, there is other applications that they're called shift address, which can get in and shift your group addresses around on your project. This is an app in the ETS online store. And then we can put our next set of group addresses in. Okay. Now, I could actually, if I was looking to speed this up, I could look at copying this and pasting it through a special paste, and we could have another 4 more times for each channel of the dimmer. And I would quickly create my group addresses. I could also click on here and use the find and replace function. So I could find living. And replace that with kitchen or training or office. And I can highlight the ones that I wanted to replace and quickly move through and change my group addresses like that as well. For the blinds, we've only got one set of blinds, and we're going to create the blinds for the living room as well. So my first group address is always up, down. The second group address, while the blinds are driving, I need a function to be able to stop them in a position. Or if they're already in the position, I want to adjust them while they're stopped. I can use this function. I also, for my visualization, would like to send them to a height in percentage. And I also want to know what height percentage they're at. That'll do us for this little demonstration. So now I've successfully got my lighting group addresses and my blind group addresses. Okay. The next step is linking. Okay. So again, really important procedure. We can't do linking before we've done group addresses. And also we can't do parameters after group addresses. Okay. We've got a process for a reason, and that leads you from one thing to another with the least amount of problems and the quickest way. For you guys that are not au fait with ETS, then there's a number of ways we can do linking. We can actually link from the group address to the object, or we can actually click on the object and link to the group address. Also, if you want to speed things up a little bit, you may want to see your view, instead of on top of each other, vertically split. So they can be split like this. Sometimes people like working like that, and it makes it a bit simpler. There's many different ways you can work with ETS. It's up to you to find what comfortably suits your style. We'll leave it in this way for the moment. Now, the big problem comes, and I find the most confusion comes when it comes to linking. Everyone gets through the functions they need, they get through the parameters they need, and when it comes to linking, it can be a bit of information. I often see people with the communication objects sitting down here at the side too. So it means they're sitting there and they're also sitting there. This can be confusing also. So I'd suggest you have just that selected. You leave your communication objects in the one window and don't have them down here. Now all we need to do is we need to link the load to the group address. And the best way to do this is to forget about the rest of your job. Just look at the device at that time, that channel at that time, and work out where it needs to be linked. Okay? Don't try and conceive the whole job in one. Don't try and make all the functions work at one point. Just concentrate on that load at the time. Okay, so I'm going to start linking, and we're going to speed things up a little bit because we've got a time constraint. And you'll see that I'm linking from one to the other and the other to the one. So it doesn't matter which way I link. I'm just going back and forth. And now I've got all my lights linked. I can tell I've got my lights linked because I can see here what they're linked with. And also, if I click on the group address, I can see inside the group address what is linked to it. It's a very good way for determining if there's any problems. Once we're finished with our dimmer, I'm not going to link the other group addresses due to time constraint. I'm going to move on to our blind relay. And when I'm moving on to the blind relay, I can close up the group address middle group that I don't need and just concentrate on the group addresses I need. So I'm going to link the blind. So the up down goes to the up down. Step stop goes to the stop and adjust. The height and percentage goes to the height and percentage. And the height feedback and percentage, remember that's a little bit tricky because it's down where position or channel 5 used to be. So I have to look for it there in this particular device. So you can see now I've linked everything that I need for that blind relay. Now it's time to move on to the inputs. So the first switch I'm going to concentrate on is the ion 104. To do this, to make it not complicated, it's always good just to go back, close down what you're not using. This way it doesn't make it so busy. So now what we can do is we can link our room switch with the switching of button 1 because we know that's our light switch, and our relative dimming to the relative dimming. You also will link your status to your LEDs, but we're not going through with that this afternoon. Then it comes to my second button, and my second button I'm going to link to the blinds. So I'm going to link that to my blinds and my step stop. Okay, moving right along, we're going to link the final button. So put it in order of what makes sense. So rocker 1, rocker 1, rocker 2, rocker 2. And I link my switching to my lights again, because in this example or scenario, we've got 2 push buttons or 2 switches or 2 keypads that are controlling the same set of lights in the living room, one at one end of the living room and one at the other end of the living room. So quite simply, only work out where he needs to be linked at the time that I need to worry about it. And what you're going to see here, if I click on any of these channels, now I can see everyone that's involved in this group address, all the main actors. So I can see here, at the moment, I have a relay or a dimmer, sorry, that's receiving an on and off command. And to that, who are sending on and off commands, I have the ion 104, and I just linked the Gira switch to it as well. So when the command set's sent on the bus from the ion, it goes out over the bus and it says, I'm looking for group address 0/0/1. Everyone hears the command, but only the dimmer reacts to it. And the dimmer takes the information in, processes it, tells the application module what to do. At the same time, though, my input for the Gira switch hears this, and if it's a toggle, he'll know that next time, if you heard it on, next time someone pushes him to turn it off. So just because he's not talking to the group address at the time, he's still monitoring what's happening in that group address. Okay, so now we've done our lighting, we're just going to link our blinds. Long operation, I like to use the up down. Short operation for the step stop. Okay, so all our linking's done. And if I go back to my presentation, the next part we're going to do is a project check. Now, you may or may not need to do the project check, depending on how unique or how experienced you are with ETS. But for you guys that are new, it's a great little check. Keeping in mind with the building view, if you need to know the size of the devices or the power supplies, you can always go on here and look in your properties, and it'll give you a great indication of how many devices are in there and how much consumption or whatever you can do, you can get out of, you'll need. We can show you that in the reports. Okay, so like I said, moving into the project check would be a nice next section, just to see if you've missed anything. And if I go over the side to diagnostics here and I press project check, it's going to ask me, do I want to verify my devices? Do I want to verify and check my group addresses? Do I want to check my topology? Do I want to check my product information? And check if any imports are required. And when I press finish, We'll just make this into a bigger window so we can see it. It gives me the results before I've even done anything. It tells me errors and warnings. So the error here for this first one tells me that that group address only has one communication object just attached to it. It's not saying it won't work, but it's saying that nothing else in that project is talking to it. It's just giving you a quick warning. The other one is telling me a warning is saying for the space group addresses, nothing's connected to them. Are you aware that you have group addresses there with nothing connected to them? It may not work as you envisioned. It can tell me also the consumption on the line. So I know from doing this small project on that line, I have a consumption requirement of 33.5 milliamps. So I'm going to need a 640 milliamp power supply at least to cover it. And it just tells me a bit of information about applications and generates other things. So there's also, it can tell you if you need repeaters or counters or whatever. So it's telling me the message, there's few two power supplies on the line, okay? Okay, after we've done that, then we get the ability to download, okay? So when we're downloading, just a quick warning, there's two types of downloading. And if I right click on the device to download, I can see there's a few different options here for download. I do have a problem with the download all. It's seldomly used, rarely used. And the reason it's rarely used is when you do download all, the first thing it wants to do is download the address, okay? In the old days gone by, that would mean pressing a program button, putting it in program mode, the device accepting the address, after it's accepted the address, then trying to push the application to it, okay? Now, we just simply don't use that too often. What we tend to use is download individual address. So when we download the individual address, we're giving a device an individual address. Generally, we're doing that in our office before it goes to site. So then when we put it on the cabling on site, we can talk to it individually. Okay, we can do things like override address, which means if you already know its address and you want to change it, ETS pretty much puts it in program mode and accepts a new address. So the most important one here is download individual address the very first time. It's only one time you have to download the individual address, then you don't have to download it anymore. The more commonly used downloads is download application. The first time we download to a device, fresh from our project, we need to download the full application to it. After that, if we make significant changes and we're not sure, or you find something happening funny, always use the download application. Without any questions asked, it is the full application download no matter what. Partial's useful. It's a bit of a shorted application download, but it only looks for the differences between your project and what the device has got, and it only pushes those new updates to the project to the products. So it's not complete. Okay, so be very wary. If you're making small changes like times or something like that, small adjustments in the parameters, then you can always use the partial download. But if you're not sure, use the download application. Okay, so for the next part, I'm going to open up a new window, and I've got my test lab here, and as you guys might know, we've got this in our Sydney office. I'm currently sitting at home, but I'm using a Gira remote access into the device. So I'm going to open it up and show you the diagnostics. So because I've got a direct tunnel with my office, I can choose any of these connections in my office, and I'll connect to any of these and they'll bring it open. So the first thing I do after I've downloaded application and address, we need to test. And like I told you previously in the webinar, a thing that I implore you guys to do always is to open up a diagnostic window when you're testing. Okay, this way we can see real time what the project's doing, what have I got wrong, and you can quickly establish whether there's a fault. So what we can do is we can press start, and then what we can do is we can actually see group addresses and monitors. So if I was to run some group address and pretend like I'm really on site and I'm pressing a button on the wall, then I can write a group address and I can follow exactly what's happening. Okay, so once I get to a part of the project where something doesn't happen or it doesn't work as I expected it, I can run back to my computer, I can press stop, and I can go through line by line and see exactly what transpired and when and how it happened. So for example, if I pushed on a push button, expecting the lights to turn on or off, then I would see this come up here. If I didn't see it come up here, then I would know, A, there's a problem with the push button. Did I connect it to the right group addresses? Did I even download to it? And if you guys remember from your basic course, you can work out what needs downloading by going to one of these windows up here. And they'll tell you that if these aren't all ticked, it means that it's not matching your project. Okay. You've made the changes on your project file in ETS, but you haven't transported that to the project. Okay. So there could be something like if I try to push the push button in the Ion and it didn't work, if I came back here and I saw that some of these green ticks weren't ticked, I would know pretty quickly that I haven't updated this device, so it doesn't know what it's meant to be sending out. And the same goes with outputs. If I see the command come across and the output not responding, instead of looking where the problem is, I can go straight to the output and have a look where that is the problem could be. Okay, finally, all of you guys, which are highly professional, and I know you all do good jobs, the next important thing is exporting or doing reporting. So to do reporting, we go to the panel, we go to reports, and we open up a new panel. I'll make it a little bit bigger so we can all see what it looks like. This way, it doesn't matter if you're doing domestic jobs, commercial jobs, everyone wants, is paying for a service and they want you to document that service. It's important for doing O&M manuals or operation or anything like that. Even if you're not actually you're quoting on a project and you've put all your devices into ETS, you can get a parts list as well to send to someone to quote. So this parts list can tell you how much module width you're going to need in your switchboard. It can tell you the parts, how many of them there are, if they're DIN rail mounted. Okay. On the completion of the job, though, usually we do a few different reports. A building view report is very important. It can establish a basic structure of your project. But this same project, if I wanted to include all the objects and parameters, I could tick these two boxes. And now my report jumps from 2 pages to 11. And it documents word for word every parameterization, every communication object that's linked, all conveniently printed and available for you to put in your folders for your documentation. Lastly, but not finally, once we've done that, we all know computers are susceptible to damage, breaking, and due to that, it's always a good idea to back up your project file. So this is the project we just created. We can export the project file, put it in a folder for somewhere for safekeeping and available for other people to use going forward. Okay, I'm just going to go back to my presentation. We'll come back to ETS in a second. Okay, resume. So we've looked over that process. Building view. Topology is always there. So even once we've done our building view, we've do our building view and we add our devices, it's always adding them to the topology. You can actually do a project without actually using building view altogether, although it's not advised. It's topology is there because it's required for addressing and it's required for a structure. Using building view will help you organize your project, and it has the same functions as topology. So you can do downloads, you can do device info, you can do all of that stuff. You can do both of them from both windows, whether it's topology or building view. It's just much easier and simpler to look at it in building view. It can be used to isolate rooms and boards for likes of downloading consumption. So again, in ETS, if I wanted to download to the whole room, I could not click on the device just to download it. I could click on the whole room and download the room. I could click on the whole floor and it'll line up every device on the whole floor and download. Building view is something you need to ensure that you get used to. It's important and imperative moving forward. With the I can't even talk this afternoon, guys. Sorry. With the advent of IoT, it's becoming even increasingly important that we have the metadata. So it records for the IoT exactly where the part in the building, what function it is, all this metadata that's used within the IoT devices. And going forward, I can put a few links in the presentation afterwards to some videos, and it shows us that we can actually do programming using functionality. So in devices, you can add a function in ETS and that will automatically create your group addresses. And the reason this is important is because you can grab channels of a device and drag them over another channel of the other device. And ETS is smart enough to know what type of functions you're wanting. And then it can make the group addresses and link it automatically. And the reason why I'm stepping on this a little bit or talking about this a little bit, the functions of the device, you can add to a room a function of light, a dimming light, or a function of a blind. And this automatically creates your group addresses. But more importantly, in the future going forward, what the idea is that you can import your group address, your ETS project file into your visualizations. And for example, it will create your building structure in your visualization. It'll create your room in your visualization. It'll create the function of that light in your group in your room, and it'll have the ETS data attached to it. So there'll be no more importing a group address or importing a project file into other visualizations. This will all become seamlessly in one. Deciding on group address structure. We touched on this a little bit before, and it is a bit of a tricky part of ETS. Part of what ETS ability is to have a free floating logic, free functionality, the way you like to do it. It's very adaptable, it's very versatile, but that comes at a price. You need to know what you're doing. And the biggest part I can say about structure of group addresses is don't leave yourself short. Think about the whole project, how it's going to lay out, and what's the best suited structure for this. There's no wrong or right. There's just better or worse. You have a limit, and remember that limit is always on the how many group addresses in the middle group addresses there are. This is the defining part. The actual group address, or the red part of what we see, is where the actual magic happens. This is the function of what's to happen. And there's an important rule. The way KNX is structured, to keep the traffic down, all inputs that are talking to group addresses, because they're active on the bus, they should only talk to one group address per communication object. Okay. Whereas outputs, which are looking to receive information and are passive on the bus, such as dimmers and blinds, they can be attached to and listen to many different group addresses. So for an example, the lights in the project we just built may be attached up to 3 group addresses, for example. It may be attached to the group address that's immediately controlling it within the room. It may also be attached to a group address to turn the whole floor on and off. That same communication object may also live in the building group address to turn the whole building all on and off. So that's a really important point when looking at group addresses and KNX. For my final thing, we've done a bit of this with the live demonstrations, but there's a few little bonus things that I wanted to show you. And most importantly out of this is downloading with serial numbers and collaboration mode. Templating, we've kind of talked a little bit about this, and it's a really good idea. And I'm going to show you a project where you make all your dimmers or your relays you're going to use, or any of your board device gear really, and then you can attach them to group addresses and you can copy them from one project to another. Or the other way you can do it is you can clone a project or copy a project and rename it and use it for your new project going forward. There's many ways that you can reduce the amount of work and effort that you can put into ETS if you're continually doing projects. So I'm just going to show you ETS again. Okay, so what you'll see here is all my projects, and what I can do is I can get the project we just made, and if that's something that I want to use going forward, I can always duplicate it as a clone or as a new project. Okay, so then all my board gear, at least if the customer hasn't changed the switch, it has changed the switches, will be at least all ready to go, all programmed. The other thing we can do, we can open up multiple projects at the same time. So for an example, if I went back to my test lab and I said, I've got a dimmer or a DALI module. These are just my test modules. And I like the way that it's commissioned. I like it's all the group addresses attached. I can actually copy it from one project and I can right click on this project, copy it, and I can take it into my new project and attach it with all group addresses. So I haven't copied it, but you can attach it with all group addresses. The same goes with group addresses. Group addresses can be exported and imported. So again, this is for another webinar. We haven't got time today, but in this, what we were doing is exporting the group addresses in a simple structure. We can manipulate them in Excel, save them again, or create them, or find and replace, or do whatever you need to do, and then import them into your group addresses structure. Or if you are a professional job integrator who's doing the same type of jobs all the time, when you start up a new project, instead of creating these group addresses again, you can import them from a template that your company always uses. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about, guys, is a new function and feature of ETS, which I've found is really helpful. It's helpful for one-man bands as well as companies that have multiple people working on multiple projects. And this is the new collaboration mode. How you enable calibration mode, just taking a step back for a sec. With ETS, because it's licensed and because it's secure and everything's secured, each project has an encryption to your computer, okay? So previously what you've found is people have to export their project file and import them back into other ETSs. And this can be time consuming, it can be laborious, it can be hard when people are working on the same project at the same time and all things like that. ETS has addressed this issue, and what we've found now is we have a thing in the data storage called collaboration mode. Sorry. If you keep the collaboration mode, I've got a slip with that. We can actually link it to folders, and we can actually link it to folders that are backed up through Dropbox or whatever. Okay, so I could use my ETS backup files, my linked folders, and then select that. And I can break those folders into, I can unlink those folders and I can go in and link different types of folders for different archives. And the way it works is once I've done my folder that's been linked to my cloud storage device, whether it's OneDrive or Dropbox or whatever, then I get the ability, I'll show you just on here. For example, I can finish working on Brisbane Showroom. I can actually back it up to the archive. When I back it up to the archive, it asks me if I want to put a comment in there, if I was working on what I've done, so it keeps a trail on it. I could keep the project local, meaning I can keep it on my computer, okay? If I don't want to keep it local on my computer, I can untick that, it'll put it just in the archive. I can lock it from other people using it. If someone else is looking in that same shared folder, they're going to have the same archive as I've got. Okay, so depending on what I do, I can lock it or unlock it. And then once I press OK, it's now exporting it to my archive. And that archive is a cloud-based folder. And the reason I know my archive is matching is because I've got a green tick. So it means that I've got my archive and my local project matching. You're going to see here, for an example, that my test lab hasn't been backed up. Now, if someone else has been working on it, I could always go to my test lab here and I could restore it. So I could restore the project that someone's used, and that will put it back into my, I can unlock or lock the project, and that will restore it because I've got it open. It's because I had that project file open. So I'm just waiting for it to import. And so it's pulling it from Dropbox or from wherever someone has dumped it previously and worked on it, and it's importing it back into my local project file, and that way I can work on it too. And thanks to the internet, it's going to take a little while, but it's a really handy way to work within your. So now you can see my test lab is got the tick there and it works there. So I can unlock these for other people, and I can, or that's unlocked at the moment. So if someone else was using that, all these have got locks on them, and the Brisbane showroom hasn't got a lock, as you saw.